There's a lot of things we can talk. Today, just we can consider the first touch. So, we will have a lot of chance if we have interest. And okay, before that, and I will, let's follow the tradition. Have people read it. And anybody want to read in any language? English, Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit? Nobody want to read it? Anybody want to read it? That will increase your...
I'll try the English.
Okay.
Unless you've got Spanish or Latin or,
I don't have a Spanish, that's the English version. Yes, go.
French. I want to hear it in Latin. That'll be great.
Oh, but I don't have a Latin version. You got to find it by yourself.
That'll be fantastic. I can read the Heart Sutra in Latin. So.
Okay, because that's have the James. Okay, have the James read it.
Okay. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when deeply practicing prajna paramita, clearly saw that all 5 aggregates are empty and thus relieved all suffering. Shariputra, form, does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself, form. Sensations, perceptions, formations, and consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all dharmas, are marked by emptiness. They neither arise nor cease, are neither defiled nor pure, neither increase nor decrease. Therefore, given emptiness, there is no form, no sensation, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of sight, no realm of mind consciousness. There is neither ignorance nor extinction of ignorance, neither old age and death, nor extinction of old age and death, no suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path, no knowledge, and no attainment. With nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on prajna paramita, and thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Far beyond all inverted views, one realizes nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future rely on prajna paramita and thereby attain unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. Anutana samika sambodhi. Therefore, know the prajna paramita as the great miraculous mantra, the great bright mantra, the supreme mantra, the incomparable mantra, which removes all suffering and is true, not false. Therefore, we proclaim the prajna paramita mantra, the mantra that says, gate, it's gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha.
Thank you, James. That's great. And anybody want to read other language? No? Sanskrit, any Indian friend here? Or Vietnamese, Japanese?
I can try and read a little bit of the Korean, just a few lines if you like to hear.
Okay, please. That's the Korean. Can you see it? Ginny.
Yeah, hold on. Mahabanya. Okay, wait a minute. I need to move you a little bit. Mahabanya para 밀다 심경. 관자재 보살 행심 반야 바라 밀다. 조견 오는 게 공도 일체 고액. 시리자 색불이공 공불이 색불 수정 핵색. 역비어시 사리자 시제 법공상 부중 불감시고 공중 무색 무수 상생식 무아니 비설사니 무책 성향비 촉법 무아니 에게스 NSC 무후식계 무무명 역 무무명진 내지 무도사역 무도사진 무고십별 도무지 역무득 이무소득고 보리살다 의반야 바라밀다 고심무가에 무가에고 무유공포 원리전 도몽상 구경열산 열반 삼세제부 의반 야바 마밀다 고득 아력따라 삼막 삼보리 고지반 야바라 밀다 시제진수 시대명주 시무상주 시무등등주 능제일체고 질시일부러고 설반 야바라 밀다주 들적수이랑. Okay, that's it. I'm not
You
going to
didn't
read
read the
anymore.
last one? Kate.
아제 바라아제 바라승아제 보지사바야 아제 바라아제 보리승아제 보리사바야 아제 보리아제 바라승아제 보리사바야.
Thank you, Jenny.
Mahaban, yeah. Well, I think you would have done better, Jason, than me.
No, I don't read Korea, but if you pay attention, the last line, usually we, according to some tradition, will read 3 times, kate, parakate, parasankate, okay? I will read it 3 times, and basically it's supposed to preserve, that's the oral tradition, with so-called mantra, we preserve the sound of the Sanskrit sound. So we believe, when I say we, I say Buddhism, or the person who recite this one will believe they have the power. So we keep so-called transliteration, not really translated the meaning, we translate the sound. So that's why if in different language, we're supposed to hear the same sound. That's the idea. Okay. So let's stop reading for a while, and during the time, and anybody think about want to read a different language, and or you find the French version, Spanish version, Latin version, or you're welcome to read it. It's supposed to read it this one, and I would say this one is the most cited. If you go to the funeral, or I just talk about my culture in Taiwan. When the people die, we believe people, the soul or whatever, will stay there for 24 hours. So the family usually will cite this one, okay, continuously for 24 hours. Okay, well, of course with different sutra, but this the one people will cite the most often. Okay, so another teaching is you don't have to understand, you just have to recite it, okay, hear it and read it, recite it, and because the sutra itself have the power. But since we are and even some people talk about if you understand, you will reduce the power. Okay, so depend on how are you going to think about it. But since we are philosophical group, so and I think we should at least try to understand the meaning of this sutra. And then usually most of the Buddhism master like Dalai Lama or anybody, then they will have their own interpretation on the Heart Sutra, and sometimes many hours long interpretation. And then a book. I have a book from Dalai Lama. It's talk about the Heart Sutra, but his version is a little bit different than what I'm reading. Okay, so they have many different versions. So before we go that, then anybody, I assume you hear it, you listen to the podcast and did some research. Anybody have any question or any opinion, something before we go in, to more detail? Or anybody have anything want to say or question, please?
I have a question, but I don't know if you want to save it for later. My question is whether shunyata would correspond to the Tao, or whether it would correspond to the yin element. The darkness, the void, the formlessness, or whether it would correspond to what underlies yin and yang.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and then everybody should have their own answer. Everybody should have his own or her own answer, because Buddhism is developed in Indian, and the Taoism is from China. These two has no connection until the Buddhism teaching go to China, and people find a lot of similarity. Just like Madeline, you think about, oh, if they talk about yin and yang, if they talk about Tao, yes, a lot of people talk about this, but we don't know, so that's all about your own interpretation. And then if you are in Greek philosophy, then you may think about the Heraclitus, you may think about different things. So, I think that's an open-end question. At least that's what I'm thinking, and everybody free to express how do you think about this question.
What's the what is the meaning of shunyata?
Shunyata means emptiness, and in the reading we have, and she has a better translation called boundless. Okay, so I think that's a shunyata, so-called emptiness. So that's another important concept in the whole sutra.
Jason, in case you can't see it, Pin and Phil have their hands up.
Yeah, okay, please.
When I listen to podcasts, there seems like there's a lot of doubt in the podcast. And I just want to know exactly at what time did Buddhism came into China, and at what time it was influenced from the Tao. At what point? I mean, did it immediately influenced by the Tao, or did it took some time to penetrate and became influenced by the Tao? Because it sounded, if I didn't know any better, it sounded more Taoist than Buddhist in a way. So could you say something about that?
I think I'm not surprised, when let's say this one has for sure, okay, Xuanzang, which is in the 7th century, Tang Dynasty, okay, he translated, okay, from Sanskrit. He traveled to India and studied state of 17 years, and then he bring a lot of sutra, Mahayana Sutra, and he translated this one. So I believe, okay, I think you are, if you live at that time, okay, I think that all the Chinese living at that time probably have the same question as Phil. You are talking about, say, hey, is that about Taoism? So it's not surprise you see a lot of similarity, and that's one of the reasons Buddhism become popular in China, but not in India, okay, because they find out, and also have a legend, okay, of course, that's later they created fake story, said Lao Tzu, who is the author of Tao Te Ching, the Taoist master, he traveled to West, according to legend, and all the way to India, Okay, so then you say, okay, actually Buddhism is Taoism teaching. Okay, there's some people talk about this, but that's just story.
Did it get to China by the rough Silk Road? I mean, through the Xinjiang province, or did it travel through Tibet? How did it get to China? I mean, he traveled to India, okay, and came back with it. And to what degree was there also influence from the other kingdoms that it went through before he went to India?
There are many kingdoms in the area. They also got like Mongolian, Tibet. They all have influence. They got learn the Buddhism teaching. Okay, so I think according to account, probably on the 1st century, already had some Buddhism teaching already in China, but not that popular. The famous one is the Xuanzang. Okay, he traveled all the way to India. Okay, and study there, learn Sanskrit, and there's one of the largest university in the world at that time, about 7th century. I think it's Nalanda University, and he become the professor over there and the teacher over there. And then and then he travel back to China, and then he has organized a group to do the translation about the Buddhism Sutra. Okay, so that's right, and then it become more and more popular. And during that time, so-called the Neo-Confucianism, they have at the early time, they start to reject. A lot of Confucian scholars start to reject, okay, Buddhism teaching, because they say, oh, this monk is not working, not producing, not doing anything, and blah, blah, blah. So there's an argument, but turn out, that's another historical account, and we can talk about later, but that's the story. And another thing is the origin of Heart Sutra. Okay, some people said this one is original from China, and the Chinese recreate the same Sanskrit version, okay, which is, I can see the reason, because a lot of thinking is very close to Chinese Taoism thinking. So it could be recreated, okay, invented in China. And then, because so far we don't find the Sanskrit original in India, but they do have something similar to prajna, paramita, this kind of thing, but much, much longer in India, in Sanskrit. It could be they read it and summarize and summarize, re-summarize, and they write it in Chinese. It could be the story, but we don't know. But this one just become popular in Asia. So we have a few hands on. Let's go from the older Pin, Chris, and Rich.
Oh, hi. So my feeling as far as Madeline's question, emptiness is closer to Tao than the concept of being. In Lao Tzu's book itself speaks a lot about Tao, the relationship between Tao and emptiness. Whereas yin is really an existence. It's a force, it's a force in nature. To add a little bit to Jason's answer to Phil's question, when Buddhism first tried to take a foothold in China, it had a lot of difficulties in popularizing. And then the Buddhists saw some of the similarities between Buddhist and Taoist philosophy and started promoting Buddhism as almost like a branch of Taoism. And that was a turning point where Buddhism quickly became very popular in China.
Thank you, Pim. And Chris, please.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's probably like just adding on to it. I will say that you can look this like in two different angles, right? So first of all, in terms of history, it did rise through the Silk Road, more or less, right? I mean, it's a 2,000-year process. where I think it first come in around the Han Dynasty, and it took about 300 to 400 years before some of the governments started accepting it. I think you gotta look at Buddhism historical wise from both a political point of view and a conceptual point of view. Politically, I would say that the not only the Confucius but also the Taoists were not that friendly. In fact, probably openly hostile to Buddhism at first, because it's a natural thing, right? Because they had a monopoly in terms of being the guidance and the mainstay to all the governors and the emperors, and then this is a new competition. So there was tremendous amount of persecution, I think, to start with. Conceptually, I wouldn't say that the like all the a lot of these concepts are borrowed from Taoism, because if you read the original text, right, from Buddha, right, because so much of this stuff, including the Heart Sutra, I would say it's a natural development, of his disciples, 100 years after he had died. And his original writing, a lot of it is very similar to Lao Tzu, independently, right? In terms of his concept of nature and balance, and how that works out, So you can easily read the Four Noble Truths and the Middle Way into the Heart Sutra, and then you can kind of relate to what the Taoism are saying, right? Part just in slightly different manner. So I wouldn't say that one borrowed from the other. I think the concept is being independently developed. It's just that it's probably written in a way that's better accepted by the local population, because they are Chinese. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, that's I personally like to read the Buddhism sutra. Okay, one of the reason is I would like to look at the Sanskrit version and then see how they translate it to Chinese. Okay, about 1,000 years ago, and also look at the English version, which is translated directly from Sanskrit recently. So you will see the difference in the West, in the East, and the India, and also its original, okay, in the first century, in about 1,000 years ago, about 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and today. So you will see how the concept have been changed and over the time. That's another interesting part to look at. Rich, please.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that thought. I think ultimately, all of the philosophies or explorations into the nature of nature are going to intersect, because we're talking about the nature of nature. It's not an intellectual exercise where people are going to use different words and therefore differentiate each other using different words or different types of practices. We're talking about the nature of nature. So it should be no surprise that there's similarities between Heraclitus, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism. So in my own practice, frequently I will come across a concept or of an idea just on my own. I discover something, and I'm not surprised maybe 5, maybe 10 years later to discover another philosopher or scientist who had similar kind of concept, because we are talking about the nature of nature. Ultimately, though, it is an experiential process. It's not an intellectual process. You can talk about it all you want, but you don't really understand it until you've gone through the practice of exploration. So you can talk about what's inside a cave all you want. You actually have to go in the cave to actually experience it. So most of the philosophies or Eastern philosophies do 2 things. One is they try to create some motivation for the exploration. This is what you'll find if you explore. On the other hand, they'll say, don't try to learn it by simply talking. You're not going to learn it that way. You actually have to explore. And so, I use these kind of meetings and forums to explore what other people have found in their explorations. but I assumed I'm gonna have to do my own work. I'm not going to get it by simply someone telling me about it.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Yeah, actually, it's important that doesn't matter how much you read, you need to practice if you want to get there. So, thank you. We have Adina and Phil.
Thank you, Jason. My question is, so there is both Mahayana Buddhism. Once it's like a second stage. Once you become familiar and comfortable with the first stage, first turning of the wheel, it's 4 noble truths of Buddha, which is recognizing the suffering and recognizing that it's what's the cause of suffering, and then being the fourth noble truth is following the path, and the third noble truth, I believe, is just detachment. So there is like 3 stages, and after that you move to a deeper. So what was that? Turning of the veil, which is Mahayana Buddhism, where you go and explore some other substance, which is emptiness. But you can't be empty unless you have clingings and attachments, right? Because like you have to, if you say, like, oh, I don't want my diamond ring, I have no attachment. I have an attachment to my diamond ring. So something like that, right? Like you have to totally let go the first stage, and then you move to the next stage. And then there is the third turning of the wheel, which I just found out about. And if anyone knows about that, if you want to share, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Elena. And I think you are talking, well, first, it has many different interpretation, and the 3 turn of wheel, that's in the original, my understanding is the original Shikamuni's teaching, so-called the 3 turn of wheel, and which is in the Theravada, teaching. So, and we will go to the 4 noble truths, and then today we have more general discussion, and then we will go that one later. So thank you, Phil and James.
Yeah, but another very important factor is the introduction of the Bodhisattvas. The very original Buddhism did not have Bodhisattvas. Did the Bodhisattvas eventually evolve in India? In the later stage, did it evolve doing the route through the Silk Roads, or did it evolve in China? Because I used to remember Guan Yin was very, very important. And to what degree was the Bodhisattva? I know that is a Buddha to be, but are they saints, or are they? I mean, what level are they in? Are they saints, or are they kind of like Buddha minor? I have no idea what the situation is.
Yeah, okay. First, Bodhisattva is the new concept only in the Mahayana, not in the Theravada. That's the first thing. And I think you talk about Guan Yin, right? That's very famous. And in some area, it's a female. Especially go to the island area for the fishermen. The Guan Yin definitely is a female. And the original name is Avalokiteshvara. So here is, and some translators just train it as Guan Yin. And then I don't know, anybody here know Sanskrit?
I don't know Sanskrit, but my understanding of Mahayana, specifically Bodhisattvas, they're people who are enlightened, but they've chosen to put off going to nirvana until everybody else can join them. So it's like they're not considered, well, I don't see them as saints, but they're people who don't have to be here, but chose to be here anyway, or beings if they are.
Yeah, that's a different concept, and it's not God. It's kind of angel, kind of savior, but they have many. We'll get there, after you read a lot, and they like a joke, you start to understand what that means, and everybody have their own understanding. So, James.
I'm not going to say anything new. The other James, sorry.
Again, the other James. You okay?
Yeah, I
James,
wanted to respond to the someone asked a question about comparing Taoism with Buddhism, and there is some similarity in that they both have this idea of emptiness, but the Buddhism seems to emphasize the idea of emptiness a little bit more, and the idea of kind of detachment from desire, and as a kind of a way to overcome suffering, you know. And you see in Taoism, I don't think they talk about suffering so much. And they don't talk about so much detachment from desire. They talk about, if you have desire, you see the things, you know, the 100,000 things in the world. If you detach yourself from desire, you know, then you see a bigger picture, right? And so it's not so much a total detachment as to, you know, showing you the way of experiencing the Tao, or maybe, you know, following the path of the Tao. So it's a little bit difference, but then when I think Buddhism maybe influenced Taoism in terms of the methods of meditation, maybe possibly. But so there's some similarities, but it's you can see the differences, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's thank you, James. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to Madeline and Gary. Then I will move to the text. Okay, move forward on the text, and of course, you know, on each section of text, we can have more questions in general or particular. Madeline, please.
Yes, I'm interested in let's call it the translation of Avalokiteshvara into Yin. It seems as if it might have been one of those things, because Avalokiteshvara was a male bodhisattva, and somewhere along the way became the female Yin bodhisattva, also of compassion. It seems as if it could be like Hinduism in India or Catholicism in Europe, where religion came in and found a correspondence with a local deity that existed already in the religion. So there may have been a pre-existing goddess of compassion, similar enough to Avalokiteshvara that it got turned from one to the other. Just speculation.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I think I read some story about this, you know, and that's another thing. And even that's my previous question. I'm asking anybody know Sanskrit, because I want to know the translation of Avalokiteshvara, because Ishvara means the Lord, and Avaloki. Okay, what's the meaning of that? Means perceive the sun. Is there anything about the sun? I don't know. You know, so that's the thing, because in Chinese they have the two different translation. Okay, like most of people talk about Guan Yin. Okay, but Yin means the sun, the crying. Does Ashva is Avaloki has anything about the crying, about the sun? I'm not sure. They have a different argument. Xuanzang have a different argument about the translation. So that's another deep question we should we can discuss on the next section or something. Yeah. We have a Gary and the Pin. Then we have to move on. So.
Yes, in the reading that you offered us for prior to this meeting, I saw that she leaned on an understanding of the emptiness, not so much, well, not as indicating that what we encounter in the real world is not real, but really focusing on its lack of separateness from everything or everyone else. Mm-hmm. And that particular focus was really intriguing to me, but it's new to me. I've not run into it before. And I'm wondering, is that a common understanding of the term? Or is that something, is that an unusual interpretation she's offering?
I think that's nothing unusual, and then everybody is unusual. So that would be my answer. And every time you hear somebody talk about this, you always feel slightly different. And then that's the one of the reason some Buddhism teacher will say, don't ask too much question. Okay, you just recite it and cite it. One day you will understand. Or just like Rich said, practice. Okay, then you will get it. So but of course we can talk and we understand, we interpret, we reinterpret, and I think that's the beauty of the discussion section, because every time, at least for me, I learn something new. So from different comments. So that's my personal opinion. But should we move on? Or Pin, you have something to say? Or
we can move on.
okay, let's move on. Phil, can you please hold? Let's move on. Okay, we have a few things we discussed. First, we talk about prajna paramita, right? Which I just make sure everybody understand. And this one, traditionally, we don't translate, okay? In all the sutra, we don't translate because para, P-R-A, means transcendent, okay? Beyond the immanence, okay? Shina, G-N-A, okay? Shinana means wisdom. So it's not the common wisdom, that's the transcendent wisdom. So example is, usually you cross the river, it's not the wisdom to how to build a bridge or build a boat to cross the river. It's how to cross the river. Okay, so that's a different kind of wisdom. Paramita means perfect, right? So if somebody know Sanskrit, that'd be better to explain. That's since nobody knows. So these words usually we don't translate in any tradition. Okay, so just called prajna paramita. Okay, and then in the reading or the podcast, the English version they translated to like a super mystery, perfect enlightenment. But usually, if you hear from Jin's reading, okay, or later somebody or myself going to read the Chinese version, and the enlightenment also not translated. So we call the Anuttara Semiyak Semi-Bodhi, okay? So that's the two things we don't translate. So that's the wisdom and that's the final enlightenment. Because if you translate it to its meaning, then you lost the original meaning. That's the idea. So usually these two are prajna paramita and anuttara semyak Bodhi. We don't translate. So just the tradition. And then you will see here, the whole text, there's a lot of numbers, okay? Basically talk of 5 aggregate, 3 marks of existence, 18 realms, 12 ink of dependent origination, 4 noble truths. They are all Buddhism basic teaching, okay? So we will quickly go through, not supposed to teach or learn every single detail, but at least we know what it is, right? What are they talking about? So, later on we can have a further discussion, because on each subject, it's like a book of a subject to study. Phil, you have something to say? Phil, you say hands up.
Yeah, no, I have my hand up for something else, but it is good. I think I want to say something about that. About the interpretation this woman had in the podcast and in the reading. That is not just emptiness. Years ago, I heard a linguist talk about linguistics, and this might enlighten the conversation in some sense. He said, at least in the Western tradition, we're stuck at different at definitions, and the definition contains the essence of something, the identity, and that we have eliminated in a sense, the other thing is being excessive, irrelevance, and so we're based on identities. And this linguist was saying something in the sense that poetry actually is different, in the sense that it's much more inclusive. And he gave the example, for instance, if you have the concept of a bird, how a scientist or how the identities would generally define that birds have feathers, they roost, they have beaks, they lay eggs and all that, and they build nests, they fly. You have all these things that birds do, and that's what a bird is. And he said, in more ordinary language, it's different. What you see is the bird is like a plane. It flies, but it's not like a plane. And other things build nests, other things lay eggs, and all these are interrelated, connected. And the surprising thing is these interrelated things give the definition for what a bird is, because when you look at language that way, what happened is at the very center, what is birdness turns out it's a reflection of all these other things that is interrelated to, that in the middle, what bird is actually empty, because it's defined by its relationship to other things. So that's an interesting concept that's actually related to this interconnectedness rather than just a definition separateness from other things. So that's what emptiness is actually empty in the center of the word bird.
Thank you. I think that's the purpose of this meetup, because when you dive in this one, emptiness is actually that many kinds of emptiness you can think about. Thank you, Phil, for your insightful information.
Thank you, Phil. That helped a lot with the question I had.
Great. Rich, you have hands up.
Yeah, just real quickly. I don't really embrace the concepts of perfect or enlightenment. It may very well be what these teachings are all about, but I find that implicitly they create a desire within the person, and with the desire comes the suffering or the frustration. So normally I would translate or look upon this kind of concept as something like more understanding. So the more you explore, the more you practice, the more you understand, without any attainment, because it never ends. It's constantly changing, so it can never really end. So in that way, it kind of softens the desires to reach some sort of perfect wisdom or perfect attainment. It's just an ongoing exploration, which I find travels through many lifetimes. So someone asks me, well, what are you going to do this life? I'm going to do what I do. And the next lifetime, I'll do what I do. I just continue on exploring. No rush, no desires, just keep going.
Thank you, Rich. James Huang.
Yeah, isn't this kind of, this idea of emptiness, isn't that a very realistic way of experiencing and looking at life, that it's all a process of flow, a change, so that you cannot grasp anything and hold on to it, right? And nothing, is without this kind of emptiness, because you think you have, something in your hand, but it's just going to disappear, right, in the next second, or even less than a second, right? There's nothing that you can grasp and hold on to, right? Even your desires are in the process of constant transformation and change, right? And that's the idea of emptiness. It is really kind of a form of, maybe a scientific realism, that is catching up with this idea of emptiness, that we, at the most atomic level, the quantum level of science, everything is in a process of change. You can never grab onto anything. It's all, either dark energy or dark matter, right? It's always, you don't know, you can't really hold on to anything.
Yeah, thank you, James.
Right.
Let me quickly read this one, and then I'll go to Alina. Okay, so at the beginning, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when deeply practiced prajna paramita, clearly saw that all 5 aggregates are empty and thus reveal all suffering. Okay, 5 aggregates. Okay, Shariputra is the one of Buddha's smartest disciple. Okay, if you remember, we talked about the Confucius, and he has the smartest, the teacher's pet. Okay, the role model student, Yan Hui. Okay, Shariputra is this kind of thing. So basically, the story is Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva is teaching, probably teaching a group of people, and traditionally they were addressed to one of the smartest or the lead student. So they call Iha Shariputra. Okay, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself form. Okay, so basically talk about emptiness, which is shunyata. Okay, and then 5 aggregates. Here's the point: is 5 aggregates: is form, sensation, perception, formation, and consciousness. Okay. Of course, these 5 aggregates, if you Google from the internet, you probably have like tons of different interpretation. Okay, so this one just one of the translation. In this one, don't stick with these 5 names, but basics they have tons of different definition. But basically talking about is the Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism. Okay, here you talk about our body, what defines us a person. Okay, unlike in Descartes, okay, or Western tradition, talk about dualism, we talk about my body dualism. Okay, but here, if you pay attention, then we talk about the Buddhism, talk about form, which is your body. Then talk about sensation, perception, formation. Formation sometimes is your habit or your action. Okay, depending on how you train, and the consciousness. So that means in the Buddhism or Hinduism tradition, the dualism include, okay, the consciousness and the body are the same side, and the self is on the other side, so-called the prajna. Okay, so that's the key difference between Western thinking and Eastern thinking. Okay, so if you talk about doing the self, the consciousness and the body are in the same side, and the self, prajna, is on the other side. So I think that's the difference. And of course, this chapter, the 5 aggregate, we can have many hours discussion on that. So I suppose we probably not going to go too much detail on this one, but if you are interested, I would suggest you do some research on that about the 5 aggregate. Okay, that's the teaching about this. And again, this one is a Heart Sutra, so it's much shorter. If you read the Pali Sutra, which is Theravada teaching, they will become much more lengthy. So they will not do like sensation, perception, formation, and the consciousness are also the same. They will not say a sensation does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from sensation. Sensation itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself is sensation. Then go to perception does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from sensation. So blah, 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 keep going. Okay, if you read the Pali canon, okay, they were doing this way. But in the Mahayana or this Heart Sutra, more concise, they'll say, okay, the other 4 are the same. Okay, so let's just move on. So that's the way. The language is a little bit different. So we go to Elena and James Cook. Okay. Elena first.
Yeah, so it's very interesting what Phil said and mentioned then. It's kind of, to me, it's a bit more, I could expand on it in terms of who we are, right? Like there is the Emperor Wu of Lian, it's Bodhidharma, and it's different topic a little bit, but I just wanted to say like emptiness, what is emptiness, and grabbing into things or not grabbing into things, and what form, sensation, perception, formation, and consciousness are. At the end, still we exist in the physical realm, and one of the ways to get to the state of nothing and emptiness is just what Bodhidharma suggested to the Emperor Wu. Try to grab it. You sit there on a mountain and just try to grab it, just physically grab it, and don't come back to me and talk to me unless you will do that. So Emperor Wu was sitting there forever. And when he came back, he was pretty much transcended. So that's the very same concept. Like to me, it's like, it's a bit easier for me to get to realize that. It's very interesting. I just wanted to share that. And if anyone has any other ways to explain it. So thank you.
Thank you. James Cook, please.
Yeah, my comment was going to be historical, and it's mostly based on my personal interpretation and perhaps some historical ignorance. I don't know all the details of when Avalokiteshvara was active as an individual who could have been recording some of the recording of these ideas was going on. But what I see here is a little bit of dualism, Western dualism. I see sensations, perceptions, consciousness, and possibly also form. It's just sort of like Western concepts being imported into the Mahayana. So that's kind of like where I'm going out on a limb here. I see this idea that there's a form in reality that's kind of like Plato's forms. And it's not like the Veda. The Veda, has consciousness, and I think there's some form of sensation maybe in the Veda, but the primary element of reality is consciousness, and the formal intuition, not so much a concept of the real form, but more this concept of formation, the idea of the conscious formation in this list. So it's interesting. There is this dualism in this presentation, and the dualism I think is imported perhaps from other sources than Vedic, and it's possibly after the original Buddhist consultations, the original Buddhist rules and so forth were put together. Maybe this kind of westernized form of Buddhism actually emerged. Now, that's not saying anything about the emptiness, because the emptiness here is seen as a way out of dualism. So in other words, if we're caught in this cycle of dependence, the way out, of course, is to realize that that these concepts, these graspings, are all empty. So that's kind of like the release from dualism. So that's kind of my science fiction version of what we're reading here. That's what I get.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to comment on the form. I think don't mix with the Plato, Aristotle's form. The form, another translation is tangible. Okay, so the form means something solid, object. Okay, so that's what I like to point out. Yeah, Rich and Pin. Then we have to move on to the next one. So thank you.
Yeah, in terms of this particular idea, where the Eastern philosophies, for the most part, kind of merge and intersect, is in this case, it's this idea of emptiness and non-emptiness being the same, is that there should be no drawn distinction. It's all fundamentally the same, just being manifest in different forms, just like steam, water, ice are the same thing fundamentally. They just manifest in different ways. So here, I don't know what would be the fundamental stuff, but one can call it consciousness or mind, or you can call it quantum waves, whatever you want, just to get what they're saying. What is empty, and science they'd call it quanta, undefinable, or in psychology we call it mind being undefinable. It's insubstantial. Is formed into all these other things. So when you see something, it's essentially all the same substrate, just manifesting in different forms. So there's no duality. There's just different manifestations of the same thing. That's something that runs through most Eastern philosophies. And so it's you cannot layer that on top of dualistic thinking in Western philosophies, where there was a separation in order to accommodate the insubstantial, the mind, and the substantial, the body. In Eastern philosophies, for the most part, they tend to merge the two as being the same in the lowest level of substrate.
Thank you, Rich. And Pin, please.
Yeah, it was being someone who's fairly ignorant of Buddhism. Have studied a bit about Taoism. This listening to the podcast was very interesting. I couldn't resist but finding that it helped me, I felt like, understand certain concepts in Taoism better, and vice versa. The things in Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi kept on popping in my mind. So try not to be too long-winded, but it seems like Lao Tzu professes that form, the concept, Buddhist concept of form is a lot like name or Ming in Lao Tzu. And You, the existence of things. So you, of course, we live in the physical world. That's the existence of things. They're forms that exist. But Wu, the emptiness is actually what gives these forms power and usefulness. For example, there's passage in Lao Tzu that says, a vessel, a vase is empty, but that's what makes it useful as a vase. A house is empty inside, and that's what gives it usefulness as a house. I don't know if that's a misinterpretation of the Buddhist concept. It probably is. So I'd love to hear from all of you who are more knowledgeable in Buddhist philosophy. And vice versa, I thought something that the podcaster said was one of the best explanations of the first chapter of Lao Tzu. That normally people translate it as the Tao that can be told is not the forever Tao. That's actually not what the text really says. The text actually says Tao can be told, but it's not the constant Tao. So I actually, personally, I favor that interpretation. And so I think the podcaster says something akin to that, we see the world, but it's constantly changing and evolving and transforming. So anyways, I just some random thoughts to share with the group.
Yeah, thank you. And then it's difficult to have everybody have the same view. And then I think the purpose is you read the text and you have your own interpretation, and we can discuss. And Phil, I will put you on hold for a while. Then let's move on to the next one. Okay, you have something related to 5 aggregation, or it's a general?
Well, I think I do, because what my thought is that it's really the human condition. I mean, the dualism is there, but it's really the human condition. Because human beings, on the one hand, has a kind of semi-access to the ontology of being in a spiritual way. But on the other hand, he also have to function in a civilized world of understanding. And those two things are very different. And you must be able to equivocate between the two worlds, because they're different, because the world of definitions and things makes it possible for us to build a civilization block by block and do things in a world. But if you live in the other world, in a sense, I'm thinking now of painting. you see the feel of things that are united, but in a sense, that is something that you see in a world that's sort of more spiritual in a way, because you see the relationship between these things. But on the other hand, there was a funny joke about Rudolf Arnheim, who's a perceptual psychologist who was really into negative space. And the joke was, he apparently got into an accident and he crashed his car. And somebody said, what happened? He was so, I guess, into that spiritual base of everything related. He was concentrating in a negative state, and he ran into a tree. So you just can't be in one space and then not in another, because one space operates differently from another. If you are functioning in a civilized world, in a world of things, you have to be aware that there are objects that you're going to run into. They're different from the relationship between that and the negative space. So on the other hand, if you only function that way, then you're too tied to the definition and the functionality of a living world that you must live in, and you then begin to forget about its relationship to the wholeness of everything. So I think that is a fundamental human condition, that if we didn't have language like we do, and just like the other animals, in a sense, we wouldn't have these definitions. You would be in the one world.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you, Phil. Okay, so let's move on. And then next, Dr. Shariputra, all dharma are marked by emptiness. Emptiness again. Then talk about neither rise nor cease, are neither defiled nor pure, neither increase nor decrease. Basically, this one, according to the lecture, is talking about three characteristics of existence. I think the better translation should be three marks of existence, because that's the Chinese translation. I think that's a good, because you don't see the existence, you only see the mark. So the three things is impermanence, our life is impermanence, and what is life is suffering, and then another thing is not self. Okay, so that's another complex concept, and then any comment on this one, or we probably should move on? This one is more.
There is
Go ahead.
There is a translation. There's an alternate translation by Red Pine, who's well respected in the Zen Buddhist community, I take it, and has his own translation. Here, Shariputra, all dharmas are defined by emptiness, not by birth or destruction, purity or defilement, completeness or deficiency. So there's a kind of like alternative antinomies by the American translator.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and then because what I learned is from Chinese. Okay, that's the translation. And then if somebody knows Sanskrit, we will talk about the Sanskrit translation, because it's just like when we translate the Dao De Jing, the Lao Tzu, it's difficult, because you have many ways to translate. And let's go to another technical. Okay, so later on he talked about, that's kind of lengthy. Given emptiness, there is no form, no sensation, no perception, no formation, no consciousness. Okay, so he repeat. Okay, remember at beginning talk about shunyata. Okay, right now we talk after shunyata. During the shunyata, there's no. Right now start to talk about no. Okay, there's no five aggregate. Okay, like that. Then talk about no five sense of organ. Right, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Okay. And then each sense organ have a sense object, right? Just like we are the knower, we have the object of knowing, right? So that the object is the sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and dharma. Okay, I think the translation is a little bit different, and I checked the original Sanskrit translation. Translate text, basics, the mind is to understand dharma. And then again, you can ask what's the dharma. That's another thing. So during the interaction between eye and the sight, they have called eye consciousness. Then when you hear something, they have ear consciousness. They have the nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, eye consciousness. So total add up, that's 18 realm of so-called duttas. Okay, so basically tell me this, all these 18 realms are empty. So 5 aggregate basically talk about a person, a self. Okay, then you talk about the existence, 3 marks of existence. Then talk about 18 realms, include the 6 sense organs, sense object, consciousness. They talk about the entire world. It's emptiness. So that's the essence here. So anything want to comment on this part? Then we move on. Okay, this one is the interest part. And it's famous, okay, about the 12th link of dependent origination, okay. The text said, there is neither ignorance nor extinction of ignorance, then neither old age and death nor extinction of old age and death, okay. So here is talking about Buddhism teaching, okay, about the 12 links of dependent origination. Okay, remember we talked about how the samsara, okay, people will recycle, you know, reborn again. So the Buddhism teaching lists the 12 steps, okay, from ignorance, formation, consciousness, name and form, 6 sense source, sense impression, sensation, desire, attachment, being. That's the life start. Then you got birth, and then you got old and die. Then you repeat again, okay, ignorance. So that's you basically talk about your everybody's life. That's the link. So why this text look this way? Basically, the teaching. I'm talking about the standard Buddhism teaching about 12 links of dependent origination. Is they have the ignorance, then extinction of ignorance, then come with the formation. They have the extinction of formation, then come with consciousness, then they have the extinction of consciousness, then come with name and form, then extinction of name and form. So that's one up, one down, one about. So that's the link. So if you want to go to nirvana, you have to break down in this link. So you get out of this. That's the standard teaching. So that's the 12. And this one, we traditional, if you read the book, only these 12 links, you can have like whole book talk about this, and they have all detailed explanation. So we are not going to this detail, but basically we are going to talk about the text. It tell you about there's no body, okay, no self, okay, no existence, no entire world, the 6 realm of there's 18 realms, right? And right now you talk about no dependent origination, no link. And in the Western sense, probably means causation, right? The causation is not there. So nothing is there. So basically that's the teaching. We go to Phil and James.
Yeah, I have a question. It just popped up in my mind in this sense, like the thing about like when you chant these things over and over again, you get the wisdom. And I have a question whether that is in a kind of hypnosis, a kind of distraction. In other words, we know that, for instance, when you watch TV newscasts, they will repeat it 3 times. They're going to tell you what they're going to tell you. Then they're going to tell you. And they're going to tell you what they just told you. The repetition itself builds in a conversation within itself that brainwashes you into a hypnosis, and it becomes real. So to what degree is somebody who's not analyzing these things just saying, oh, the mere repetition is actually in some ways a pure way to understanding? Is that not just hypnosis that he's talking about, psychological warfare of sort? So I wonder about that, because I could see, I could believe in, you know, the nothingness and all of that kind of stuff, but the pure chanting itself seems a kind of hypnotic thing that convinces you, even though it really doesn't. because the repetition, we're so drawn to repetition that it becomes real. Could you say something about that? Because I'm actually attacking
Want me
it.
to say something? Actually, I agree with you. You know, that's about also my personal thinking. So in education in general, that's just my personal view. Okay, so I'm not intention to convince everybody, but my personal view, I don't like memorize the thing. Okay, I don't want recite. Okay, I think just like Phil talked about, you hypnotize and you stop thinking. So I against early forced education, because you force kids to memorize too many things, the kids start to, you know, just take as truth and not thinking. So that's just my personal view, because you feel you talk about something interesting, I cannot stop to express my own concern. So sorry. Okay. We have a few hands up. Then let me have some people haven't talked yet. Speak. Okay, we have Fred and Dan. They start first if you haven't talked for today.
I think the repetition is essential. It's part of most religions. You get a lot in Christianity and Islam, and certainly here as well. To the here religion in quotes, okay. But the repetition is essential, and I think the goal is actually the opposite of distraction. It's one of concentration on what's important, and what's important is not words, and it's not a conversation in your own mind, and it's not brainwashing in the sense of here's a proposition, and if I repeat it long enough, I'll have no choice but to believe it. I think it's brainwashing is an interesting term, because in one sense it is brainwashing, in that the idea is to wash all that brain activity away and to concentrate on the essence of the repetition, I guess. So I would claim it's different. It's really hard to describe, but that's why it's an essential part of religions, because you're trying to grasp through the impermanence and to the essence, and not do it through words, and not do it through cognition, and not do it through arguments. Emphasis on not here, you notice. So that would be my take on it. I think it's absolutely essential to the I wouldn't even say understanding, to the realization of Shunyata.
All right, thank you. I take you as advice. Okay, so thank you. We have Dan next. You haven't spoken yet.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I'm having trouble putting this into context with some of the other Buddhist sutras. Okay. So the Dhammapada and the Eightfold Path. So when I see those are very practical tools for beginners, it seems like. Whereas, you know, reviewing this, it seems like this is more for someone more experienced, like Shariputra, who's probably been practicing the Eightfold Path for years or even decades. But this right here seems like something that you want to be mindful of if you're practicing the Eightfold Path. So right view talks about how ignorance leads to suffering. So if a beginner saw this and, you know, he interpreted this as, oh, don't worry about this, it probably wouldn't be helpful, because I think it's important to kind of see the origination of suffering. So it kind of seems like this would work for certain individuals. This would be useful to kind of go over, to kind of get rid of these concepts that you set up to reach to a certain point. But yeah, I'm kind of having a difficult time, because I feel like if you pursue the Noble Eightfold Path, that goes in contradiction with some of the things in the Heart Sutra. So I'm trying to figure out how to use this sutra for my benefit.
Okay, so sorry, you know, I don't think that anybody can provide answer. Yeah, but I can tell you the fact is eightfold path base is more focused by the Theravada, okay, and the 12 link of dependent of origination is more on the Mahayana. So it's a different kind of different school, but how to consolidate? Then, well, I don't know. You know, one day, 20 years later, I may give you answer, but at least now, we have, okay, sorry, we have a lot of hands up, and then I would like everybody kind of limit the speak about in 2 minutes. So, so we can move on and make sure we touch every subject. We're supposed not to go too deep, okay, but we just general search, get a taste on everything. Then we're supposed to generate more question than answer your question, I think, put this way. And Gary, I think you haven't spoke yet, and they start first.
Yeah, quickly with regard to the chanting and the question of hypnosis and how we become convinced of things. I think one of the things that we're really discovering now with regard to the way the brain works is that we have a tendency to accept as true what is familiar. And so what is repeated often enough, or even exclusively, taking over the awareness space, whatever we hear often enough, we have a tendency to accept it. It doesn't mean it's true, and it doesn't mean that it is brainwashing us in a negative sense. It's simply a part of how the brain itself works. And I think that's an important piece for us to just leave there on the table as part of the discussion. It doesn't tell us everything. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's important. Yeah. Who's next? James and Madeline. James Cook.
I'm sorry, I was muted. This is a really interesting list, and I think what it brings up for me is circles. I think the list is can be seen in the light of the Mahayana belief in transmigration of the soul. This could be seen as a part of that, as a circle. I think each of these categories could possibly be drawn in a circle by themselves. Like this, I've heard the circle of attachment being spoken of, and the circles of consciousness are very common. Cycle of ignorance, so forth. So, and of course the cycle of birth and death at the end. So these concepts which possibly forming a kind of like a circle of existence, which is all could be seen as a kind of like a limitless circle, but the idea is that any one of these, I just wanted to ask you, Jason, for your opinion, would you try to fit something like project and accomplishment into this list somewhere? Or is that kind of like, have we already eliminated that somehow in Buddhism? Is it kind of like too inappropriate to bring up the Western notions of, they're not just Western, they're modern notions of project and accomplishment?
If you ask me, I will say that one is that's between the birth and that's something between birth and old and death, right? So that's just considered to the big cycle. That's just a small thing, right? Achievement, that's just a small thing. You see, that's so many things. So we start from being. We consider your embryo, right? Your zygote, right? When you started, that's being. Then you get birth as a baby, then old and death. So your achievement or project is just between here, and there's more things here. So that's again, just as I said, this one only this subject. Each one we will take hours to talk about this. So it's supposed not to go to too much detail. So let's move quickly. Next one is Madeline and Rich. So Madeline first.
Yes, this is kind of a jumble of questions. It's about the 12 links of dependent co-origination. And in the podcast, she talked about what you had said about them being kind of a chain. And so that the Heart Sutra and the Gate mantra address the first one, which is ignorance. And then the others follow along from that. I'm wondering, so my wondering is about what level of existent beings these apply to? Like, is it only human beings? Or is it all sentient beings, which would include animals? Is it, or is the whole point of it to kind of void out the universe? To remove all of these things from everything in the universe and just have it be a big boundless one self with no aspects of it that perceive them as separate, that perceive themselves as separate? I don't even know how to put the question, really.
Yeah, it's a big question. Actually, okay, let's not answer your question because that's that's people have a different. But that's important to ask question more than so. Just like I said, the purpose is not answer all your questions, to probably to generate more questions, so you have more interest to research, and then we can talk more later. So
I could just interject just a second. To me, the question is, in one sense, does a dog have Buddha nature? And the answer is you can look that up. We can have a whole discussion on just that.
Yes, that's a good question. But basics, in my understanding, Buddhism believe dog, cat, animal, they all have a Buddha nature. That's at least for the Mahayana teaching, what I read. Okay. It's like this. So, Rich, please.
Yeah, I wanted to briefly remark about the concept of repetition. So I've studied many diverse disciplines. As you know, singing, I'm very diverse. And where they all intersect is this: the more you repeat, the more spiritual it becomes. The experience changes from a very intellectual, conscious, in some cases boring experience, into a spiritual experience where all dives in and you experience something totally different than what you began when you began. One thing I learned by doing all these different things, I'm learning harmonica right now. It's all the same, repetition. One thing I learned is don't go in with expectations. Just go in and start practicing. Practice in the way you feel comfortable, but practice. Keep repeating and practice. Begin to manifest. For a long time when I practiced Tai Chi, there was always some sort of goal that I wanted to get. In some cases, it's contests and trophies for people. It was only when I dropped all that, when I wasn't seeking anything, when I wasn't looking at anything, I just did it with repetition, that I began to sink deeper and deeper into a more spiritual realm of feeling of the nature of nature and the nature of life. And because they all happen, a pool player, someone who practices billiards, they will do it 10,000 times. And then when they start playing, they're not thinking anymore. They just know it's going to go in. The same thing with a basketball player. 10,000 times they shoot the ball. And then at some moment in that process, the only reason it doesn't go in every time is because someone's trying to block it. Otherwise, it goes in. It changes, it transforms into something different. Whatever age you are, wherever you are, I encourage to begin the process. Choose something you enjoy a lot. It could be writing, it could be singing, it could be an instrument, any sport, and just start repeating it. It happened to me when I played table tennis. I start to hit the ball, and I no longer am hitting a ball. I'm feeling the ball going somewhere. I'm directing it in a much more spiritual way. So repetition, I find to be at the heart of diving deeper into a more spiritual understanding of the nature of life and nature of the universe.
All right, thank you, Rich. Okay, so look, guys, we have two different opinions on that, but that's not resolve this one today. Sorry. Okay, so we heard both sides, and then let's continue. Who's next? Chris, Phil, and Pin. Then we have to move on. Okay, Chris, please.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just make a quick point of view on the mantra, I'll call it. So I'll do it from a scientific point of view, right? So I think it's very difficult to discuss the subject just based on personal experience, which is important, but is a subjective experience. So it's very, everybody could have some different ones, and or from a metaphysical point of view, right? So what we have done in the last 10 years is in the neuroscience field, we have systematically gathered somewhere around like 500, 600 monks, and we've been monitoring them during normal daytime and when they're doing their meditation chanting. The only difference in the process of monitor is that we're able to put our brain into a fMRI machine while they're doing this. So what the fMRI machine does is showing which region of the brain lights up when people are doing different kind of activities. So we can actually do a empirical tracking of what's actually happening. So what it shows us is that the chanting allows the monks of different religious denominations to access a part of the brain that we normally cannot access during waking hours, or not during like a deep meditation session, right? So I will compare, instead of saying the term like say brainwashing or it's a repetition or focus, I'm more thinking is like the legend of Sinbad. When you say the word open sesame, the door opens. That's probably scientifically, that's how you really describe it, because what the chanting allows it is allow you to access a different part of the brain that's very difficult for you to access normally, right? We have two ways of accessing this part of the brain, the subconscious. One is the chant, which accompany with the meditation, or you can participate in certain form of psychedelics like LSD, ayahuasca, psilocybin, that type of thing. Both will achieve the same results, more or less. So that's just that. So from a scientific point of view. And then the only bone I had to pick, and this is part of just personal case, Jason, is when I look at the 12 links, I would say from a logical Venn diagram, a lot of them are not mutually exclusive. You see what I'm saying? I'm just looking at it from a philosophical point of view, right? So, instead of having 12, I can probably shrink this down to like 7, because so many of them are interdependent and interlinked. So that's anyway. That's just there's a pet peeve. That's all I'm saying. So yeah.
I totally agree with you, but first we need to know that. Well, that's not my invention. First, okay, that's.
No, that's what they have to. It's not you.
For 1,000 years. Okay, so and second thing is about the translation. Okay, so how do you that's why we talk about. I warn everybody. This one, every one of these 12 we can talk about hours about this. And then we put together, we talk another 3 days on this. Then confuse people more than I answer the question. But
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
you just know the name. I think that's the purpose. Okay, sorry, it's probably it's this one is a difficult one, and that's why I take me so long to put up on this section. Okay, so and when we talk about change, the I Ching, that would be another thing like this, I believe. So.
So Jason, just make one point, right? So I think it's really good that you put together a list. My only input would be that is really, because I remember you asked the question at the beginning, is the Heart Sutra more like a religious text or more of a philosophy, right? I would say that if you have studied philosophy, fairly intensely from a Western point of view, it's very difficult to put that completely into the philosophical field. And we know from the origin of the Buddhism that Buddha is not his intention for this thing to become religion. It's more of a guidebook for life, right? For everybody. Mm-hmm. So it is really floating somewhere in between. That's how it's very difficult to classify as one versus the other, because it's right in the sweet spot in between. It doesn't, I don't know, you can really, if you're going to do like a rigid or rigorous philosophical analysis, it'd be pretty difficult because you run into so much contradictions. So.
Yeah, it's difficult. That's why I'm asking the question, but I don't expect a good answer.
Yeah. I'm good. Yeah, it was long-winded. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move. Let's have three hands on. We have Phil, Pin, and Gary. Then I'm going to move on to the next one. So, Phil, please.
On the one hand, I want to thank the people for providing counter arguments about repetition. That was good to hear. However, I also know that we are imperfect beings and we have weaknesses. And quite often, those weaknesses could be a downfall in a number of ways, because we know that there are malevolent people in the world that could manipulate the weaknesses. There's also your own weakness. For instance, while chanting may have opened doors to another way of viewing the world, we also know, at least scientifically, chemically, there's also addiction. You are repeating certain things, and the chemical structure within your brain demands more replenishment, so you become addicted. So when does a repetition of something open the door, and when does it close it back so you're shut? So I know that I have my own bias because I'm a kind of a skeptic about things. I want to question these things. But on the other hand, I do understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying that, for instance, there's the Chinese re-education camps that by repetition is re-educating you into the right way of thinking. So I just wonder that, so many religions do depend on the repetition of things. It just seems to me, since repetition is such an important aspect of human being, is a kind of also not only a door opener, but also a weakness that you could be played on. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying, like.
Yeah, please. Okay. That I think we all understand that the two sides, and let's put this one on hold. And I promise in this meetup, right now we are doing understanding, and at the end, okay, we are going to chant gate 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 paragate. Okay, so we're going to do both. Okay, so we try to understand this part, and we are going to recite this one. And remember, I'm not all by. I try to be fair. At the beginning, I asked 2 people read it, right? Korean and English, and then I'm going to read in Chinese. So we will make sure every side we do it. And I know this one is a difficult question. We can discuss for a long time. Sorry for you guys. And then I have to put this one on hold, because we have to move on. Pin and Gary.
Just as a joke,
we should ask Phil to chant this 10,000 times and then come back and tell us if he still thinks the same way. Well, sorry I know you wanted to kill this topic, but if I may, I actually agree with everything that's been said. I don't see necessarily contradictions. I think it's all true, but I'd like to add one more perspective is, when I was a kid, the elders always told me, well, not always, but many of them would tell me that the classics has to be memorized with absolutely no explanation. Because just memorize it. When you're young, you're good at memorizing things, and it should not be explained, because when you get older, you'll naturally understand. So of course, when you're a kid, this doesn't sound very appealing. But as I age, I actually find that there's truth in that. There are moments, when I was young, there was a lot, especially in drums, the Taoist text, that I read it over and over and over and over. I just couldn't understand it. But somehow when I get older, some of the passages just start to make sense. Or it would be, sometimes it's more cataclysmic events, when you're suffering some grief or loss, all of a sudden certain verses come into your mind and make sense and helps you get through those times. So I'm not advocating, I agree with Jason, pedagogical education is much better, but there's some truth to this that I find personally. And
really?
another...
Yeah, let me say, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. Another totally different thing. I remember my dad. My dad is actually considered himself a Buddhist. Once he told me that, he said, the way I see Buddhism, it's actually atheism. That Buddhism is actually not a religion. Each Buddhist sattva actually represents a philosophical construct or concept. And it's only to spread the thinking to the popular masses, that people want to attach things. It's easier for people to accept things when there's some physical image that they can attach to, that they can worship, or they can. And so anyway, I just want to share that perspective. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what Pin talked about is exactly my experience. But I draw the totally opposite conclusion. So, and we talk about this later. Yeah. So, Gary, please.
Very briefly, I'm really fascinated with the question you began between, is this religion, is this philosophy? And without having an answer, I'm pretty well convinced that the key to unlock that one has to do with really understanding human psychology, what goes on in our brain, what happens with our emotions, and that those other pieces that we're trying to unlock emerge from that. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, let's move on. Okay, then the teaching continue. Okay, no suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path. Okay, so basically he say no to the Four Noble Truths. This one is the very, very original teaching of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, there's noise on there. I think that's, okay, so that's a form. I think we mentioned about this one before, and for sure we will talk about this one later, about the Four Noble Truths. Is that Pin? Okay, that's a Four Noble Truths. That's the basic fundamental teach, okay, from the Buddha. Okay, so first we talk about the suffering and the causation. What's the suffering coming from? What's our purpose as a nirvana? And the how to do it. That's the so-called eightfold path. Okay, so what's the eightfold path? It's another subject we can talk about. Let's quickly draw the conclusion. Enlightenment. Okay, so for the most, or for everything I know about the translation except English, they all keep the enlightenment not translate. Okay, this enlightenment. So all keep the Anuttara Samyaka Sambodhi. Okay, all keep this one as origin sum. Just like I think Rich talked about this. Because if you call it enlightenment, it probably kind of stick with something you want to reach. That's why they keep the name. But that's just my opinion. So basically, the logics go this one. They say no on every school of Buddhism teaching. Then they so since you have no self, nothing, everything is no, even no, say no to Four Noble Truths. Then that means you get no knowledge and no attainment. Because you have no knowledge and no attainment, so you know the Bodhisattva rely on prajna, paramita, and thus the mind. With this, there's no hindrance. No hindrance, they have no fear. Because there's no fear, you will have no inverted view. I believe here talk about Maya. Then you can realize nirvana. That's the final goal. So basis to the way that you want. So remember, the beginning is from prajna, paramita, and finally you will reach the anuttara samyak sambodhi. Okay, so that's the thing all want to do. Then later on, they talk about the remind us again. This one is sutra, just like, okay, I think it's probably talk to Phil, okay? You have to recite, not just understand, okay? So you never forget, okay? So you have to recite the mantra. Mantra is the oral power, okay, for the song. Geta, geta, para, geta, okay? Ageti, geti, para, geti, para, samgeti, bodhiswattha, okay? So basics, that's go over, and everybody go over, then get enlightenment. So if I have to translate, but the key is to recite. And the tradition, you will see the Korean and a lot of tradition will recite this one 3 times. So that means if you have to recite the whole sutra 10,000 times, and the last sentence you will recite this 30,000 times. So okay, so I think that's most of this. I think we go through the 270 words, okay, in 2 hours, and I hope everybody. And then Madeline, you want to say something, please?
Yes, before we get into the mantra, which I have actually known and loved for a long time, I find it very, very interesting that at the end of the sutra basically says all the dualities, everything you know doesn't really exist. There's no true, there's no false, there's no this, there's no that. At the very end, it says, this mantra which removes all suffering and is true, not false. Can anyone comment on that or elucidate that?
I'm not going to comment, but anybody want to comment, you are welcome to comment, because so, I think that's the purpose. And then let me, before we go, I have a few hands up, and then I put this kind of summary on this sutra. So that's my own story. Okay, I don't see anybody talk about this. That's the way I look at. Okay, the story. I put this one as a story. Okay, Avalokiteshvara. Okay, he taught a group of people, including Shariputra. Okay, then he started to talk about prajna paramita. Okay, and then will reach anuttara samyaka sambodhi. Okay, so that's the beginning to the end. Then he talked about emptiness, shunyata. They talk about no, say a lot of no on everything. No 5 aggregates, no 3 marks of existence, no 18 realms, no 12 links of dependent origin, no 4 noble truths. Okay, everything is no knowledge, no attainment. So you have no hindrance, no fear, no inverted view. Then you can realize in the nirvana. That's his teaching. Then after his teaching, I believe, okay, I believe the story is the Buddha show up, okay, and tell everybody Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisattva. Okay, so go. So I kind of say you did a good job. Okay, let's go. That's my understanding. So that's why they keep the last words as a sacred word. So preserve the original sound. That's my own story, and that's my understanding. And I just like to share with everybody. And let's go to Phil and James.
I love Madeline's comment. I could take it two ways. One way is the generous way. Maybe this is a Zen koan, because you can't understand it. I mean, so therefore, in some sense, you have to accept it. The other way is take it the Trumpian way. I am the only one could solve the problem. so you have a funny duality right there. Is it a Zen koan or is it another one of those sayings by Donald Trump?
Well, thank you for mentioning that. So okay, so we will have, I think in my schedule in next 4 section, I'm going to repeat on the Buddhism section, and then give me any suggestion. You know, my idea is to probably talk more about Zen, okay, on the Western side. So get another survey about the idea. So we will have many things to talk, you know, on this. So we don't have to resolve all questions today. James, please. You are muted, James.
Sorry. Yeah, on the mantra being bright, supreme, incomparable, removing all suffering. The next line was going to be, you could practically brush your teeth with it, but I think the author finally decided to say, well, it's true.
Well, thank you. Well, you can. That's okay. That's the. We have the. I think that okay. It's 3 o'clock, and then we have to go through every single one, and then before I think we should follow Rich's suggestion. We should cite it. Let me cite it in. Anybody want to read it in Chinese? Okay, then I read it. 般若观自在菩萨行深若般若波罗蜜多时，照见五蕴皆空，度一切苦厄。舍利子，色不异空，空不异色，色即是空，空即是色，受想行识亦复如是。舍利子，是诸法空相，不生不灭，不垢不净，不增不减。是故空中无色，无受想行识，无眼耳鼻舌身意，无色声香味触法。 无眼界，乃至无意识界，无明，亦无明尽，乃至无老死，亦无老死尽，无苦集灭道，无智，亦无得，以无所得故，菩提萨垂，依般若波罗蜜多时，心无愧碍，无愧碍故，无有恐怖，远离颠倒梦想，究竟涅槃。三世诸佛依般若波罗蜜多故，得阿耨多罗三藐三菩提。故知 般若波罗蜜多是大神咒，是大明咒，是无上咒，是无等等咒，能除一切苦厄，真实不虚。故说般若波罗蜜多咒，即说咒曰：揭谛揭谛，波罗揭谛，波罗僧揭谛，菩提萨婆诃。Okay, so that's my reading, and then, okay, Mia.
Sorry, can I just correct an important pronunciation?
Oh yeah, please.
The statement you make there. It's not banruo, it's actually border.
Yeah, border. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I just read it in the Chinese. Yeah, thank you for correcting. You want to read it in your correct way?
Me?
Yeah, if you want.
I actually do the Kumarajiva's version.
That's fine. Do you
really?
Kurojima, yeah, Kurojima, yeah. Jomo Rosi. Okay, yeah, I know that version. And Xuanzang is disagree on the translation.
Right.
You can read that one. I'm happy to read the Jurakuma's version. But
do you have that version?
No, I don't.
Okay, just 1 sec. I have it here.
Okay, so everybody, any question when Akira is looking for something? And
Just a quick comment.
Yeah,
I think of the three readings, the Korean reading sounded the most like an incantation, the repetition.
that because Ginny is doing a good job, I think.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think it's the enunciation of the words. It seems to have a more rhythmic feeling.
But I enjoy what the James reading, James Cook, because it sounds
I just have to confess, I read Korean, but I didn't understand everything, most of what I was reading. I just want to confess that. So if anybody in here who knew Korean would have detected, oh my God, her Korean is pretty awful. Just wanted to confess.
That's fine. We just like I think Rich talked about it. We need to chant it, practice. Understand may not be that important.
Yeah, you don't need to understand it. You just need to chant it. That's what I mean. It's the most.
Well, I'll tell you what. One of my aunts was a Buddhist teacher. She had her own temple all of her life, basically, since she was 20-something years old. And I used to witness her temple meeting. I don't know if you call them meetings or prayers or whatever. And they did so much chanting. And what Jason said earlier about chanting whatever text that they were chanting 3 times, I absolutely believe that they at least did it 3 times. So much chanting going on at these Buddhist temple. I don't know. Do you call them meetings or pray services? I guess you call them services.
Yeah, you can call it service. Yeah, but let me explain why I like James reading. Okay, because I realized probably that's his first time read it, or that's he doesn't understand that much. Sorry, James. So, but I can feel the original interaction about the text. So I think that's the initial response I feel is amazing. Unlike when I read it, I read so many times, so I kind of like through. So it's no feeling on that. So just my opinion, and then I hope James don't mind. But I think you did great.
When I was originally a Catholic in religion, I remember all the we had to read Latin, recite Latin, and it was mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. It was like constant repetition. So I definitely identify with what Ginny had to say. That's and that's what the Catholic Church got rid of. In the 1960s, they got rid of the requirement for Latin recitations because it was so predictable, the absolute lack of excitement when people had to utter these verses in Latin without understanding a single thing they were saying.
Okay, is Myra, you still there? Are you find anything?
Yeah, I found it.
Okay, please.
I read very slowly though.
Do you have the text? Put the text on that, or you?
Oh, pardon me?
You have the link. You can put the link in the chat.
Oh, the link. Just one sec. Okay, it's here. Oh, it's
the link.
Not this one. Sorry, I can't really.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, here. Yeah, I found it.
Did you put it in the chat?
It compares 2 versions.
Okay, that's fine. Just okay. That's so basically. Everybody see this one? It's not the text, right? It's just the introduction.
The text is there.
On this page?
Yes. You need to scroll down a little bit.
Did you see it or you don't see it?
No,
okay, I can copy paste in the chat maybe.
That's fine. You know, yeah, you can just read it. You know, and
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I just did like research a few days ago, and I don't fully understand. So I'm gonna, yeah. Okay,
yeah,
I can
please,
share.
yeah, I can see it. Yeah, on the chat. Yeah, please.
观世音菩萨行深般若波罗蜜时，照见五蕴皆空，度一切苦厄。舍利弗，色空故无烦恼相，受空故无受相，想空故无知相，行空故无所相，识空故无觉相。何以故？舍利弗，非色亦空，非空亦色。色即是空，空即是色，受想行识亦如是。舍利弗，是诸法空相，不生不灭，不垢不净，不增不减，是空法，非过去，非将来，非现在。是故空中无色，无受想行识，无眼耳鼻舌身意，无色香味触法，无眼界，乃至无意识界，无无明，亦无无明尽，乃至无老死，无老死尽，无苦集灭道，无智亦无得，以无所得故。菩萨以般若波罗蜜故，心无挂碍，无挂碍故，故无有恐怖，离一切颠倒梦想苦恼，究竟涅槃。三世诸佛依般若波罗蜜故，得阿耨多罗三藐三菩提。故知般若波罗蜜咒，即说咒曰：揭谛揭谛，波罗揭谛，波罗僧揭谛，菩提僧舍阿。
Thank you. So basically, I just like, you know, there's a two famous translation on this one. This one is Kumar's translation. I think it's the early one, and the one I read it, and which is more popular, is from Xuanzang. Okay, so that's a two famous Buddhism monk. They do the translation, and then thank you, Maria, to read a different translation. So I think that's all for today, and thank you everybody for this one. And the next week we are going to talk about Zhuangzi, and Pin is going to lead the section about reading Zhuangzi's famous chapter, so-called autumn floods. Okay, so that's not in the inner chapter, that's the outer chapter. So welcome everybody to join. So thank you, and then thank you for joining us, and then